sketch and 4 assistant surveyors, including a 24-year-old William Jacob. In January 1839, light travelled north through an area that was ideally positioned on the road to the north of the colony. Just waiting for Jenny to... You could use the arrow instead of the mouse. Talk amongst yourselves, folks. Here we go, good, yeah. So in January 1839, light travelled north through an area that was ideally positioned on the road to the north of the colony and to the River Murray. And he found choice land at the junction of the North and South Para rivers, with nearby rolling hills. And in early 1839, the Gawler Special Survey was made for 12 individuals, including Henry Murray and John Reed. Light planned the town by July, and like Adelaide, he specified a belt of parklands. The town was named after Lieutenant Colonel George Gawler. The State Library has the Gawler family papers, with the royal warrant with its wax seal signifying his appointment as governor. The town was laid out in 1839 by the 24-year-old William Jacob. Now here he is at the age of 56. William Jacob later became a pastoralist and a vigneron, and the Jacob's Creek, yes, was named after him. The library actually has an image of his own wine label, Jacob's Muraroo Riesling. Now, interesting spelling of the word Riesling, R-I-E instead of E-I. And today there's Muraroo Park Vineyard at Tanunda, which is now owned by its winemaker Wyndham House, who also has a wine bar and an eatery on North Terrace in Hackney. And of course, the State Library has various Jacob's Creek wine labels. So these are some of about 10,000 labels in the library's collection, being the wine state. Now, the State Library doesn't seem to have an original of William Jacob's 1839 survey. The best I could find in the map collection is this 1865 plan of Gawler Town, drawn in accordance with the original survey. The earliest representation of the township is a pencil drawing made by James Henderson on Captain Frome's surveying expedition, which stayed overnight in July 1843 at an inn on their way to the northern Flinders. Now, we know the building on the right in the background was the inn because it has a distinctive gable roof, which you can see better in this close-up. And there's this classic sketch of Gawler from around 1845, showing the inn, now called the Old Spot Hotel, which was the first building in Gawler. And you can see the proprietor's name, Calton. Now, we know from Bob Hode's wonderful directory, Hotels and Publicans in South Australia, that the Old Spot was originally known as the Golden Fleece. Then it was known as Calton's, then the Old Spot. And in 1842, Sarah Calton was the proprietor. So it wasn't unusual for women to be publicans in those days, particularly if their husbands ran into a spot of bother. And about 10 years ago, the Old Spot Hotel was remodelled, and the new proprietor changed the name back to the original Golden Fleece Hotel. John Reed and his family were the first settlers in Gawler in 1839. They owned Section 1, which was most of Gawler East. John Reed's daughter Eliza wrote her reminiscences, The First Settlers at Gawler, in which she says her father and Mr. Murray were advised by Light to take up land there. She writes, Colonel Light said that Mount Barker had better land, but this would be the key to the Murray River and the north, and that by laying out a township in the fork of the two rivers, it might become a most valuable investment. And there's the Old Spot again. Colonial artist George French Angus painted a scene on the Gawler River. He wrote in 1847, The plate represents the trunk of an aged gum tree or eucalyptus on the banks of one of the waterholes of the River Gawler. The marks in the bark are incisions or cuts made by the natives with their climbing sticks. At the season when this view was taken, the grass around was parched in many places, and the course of the river marked only by a succession of deep waterholes. The Para rivers were named from the Ghana word pari, for a stream of flowing water. Eliza Reid wrote about the Indigenous people. There were about 250 in the Para tribe. They were very quiet. We tried to get them to work for us and to wear clothes. After a time, they did some work for us, but would never wear the clothes we gave them. A corroboree was a wonderful sight. Eliza describes the vegetation in her reminiscences. At the South Para, it was a mass of lovely shrubs. The kangaroo grass was as high as sweet corn, with a few flowers among it, among clumps of wattle with their lovely yellow balls which scented the air. On our land, we never allowed a gum tree to be cut down except to build bridges. I couldn't find an image of Eliza, but her husband, Dr. David Mahoney, I think that's how you pronounce it, looks rather prim and proper. Another early account of the district was kept by Dr. Charles Davies, who arrived in 1839 and kept a journal up to 1876, describing his life as a doctor in North Adelaide and his farming experiences north of Gawler. On the 22nd of July 1841, he wrote in his journal, "Started this morning at 8:30 a.m. on the way to Lindock Valley. Saw a wild turkey on the plains before the Little Para. Arrived at the Little Para about 12 o'clock, and after resting was just starting when Mr. Carlton came up with his cart on which I got. A short distance on the road from there, Mr. Aston overtook us, and we all went on to Gawler town, having passed the Great or South Para." And later he writes, "Got to the Little Para at 12:30. Dined at the old spot, Mr. Gray host. The stream is now running, and at holes contains all the year small fish and crayfish. The bridge was washed away in the winter of 1862, and now the crossing up and down the banks of the river is very bad." So that's an interesting detail about the fish and the crayfish. They're probably yabbies rather than crayfish. And this letter was one of the many that were transcribed by our wonderful transcription volunteers, two of whom are here today. Do you want to put your hands up? Judy? Helen? Yep. Did fabulous work. There's another letter by Alfred Burks, who was a junior clerk in the South Australian Banking Company, wrote back to his grandmother in England in July 1857. "There is but one street of any importance, about 1/4 of a mile in length and 60 feet wide, called Murray Street. The houses are of every description. There are but 2 or 3 two-storey buildings, all the rest are one. That is nothing but the ground floor and no cellars. Some are built of wood, some stone, some brick, some mud, and some posts stuck in the ground and plastered with mud between. There are no half-dozen houses alike the whole length of the street. At the north end of the town, on an eminence, are 4 chapels, 1 Free Scotch church, 1 Wesleyan chapel, 1 Independent, and 1 Catholic chapel, with 1 general cemetery. I think it's called Church Hill these days. 10 years after Gawler was settled, a German group known as the 49ers emigrated to the country, to the colony, on board the Princess Louise, and among them was Richard von Schomburg. The 49ers were mainly professional people, academics, musicians, including the conductor and composer Karl Linger, artists, architects, engineers, artisans and apprentices. They were political and economic migrants after the protests in autocratic Germany, rather than religious refugees. Richard Schomburg became director of the Adelaide Botanic Gardens, so he was a significant figure. In 1850, the Register newspaper reported that the German company has purchased a section of land about 4 miles from Gawler town on the Gawler River, section 44 in the 100 of Mudlawirra. It is proposed to lay out a township to be called Buchfelder, after a celebrated professor of that name, and Buchfelder is now a suburb of Gawler. Now, curiously, there used to be 100 of Schomburg, but its name was changed during World War I to Maud. And you've probably walked past the plaque to Richard Schomburgk on North Terrace, showing how significant he was to the state. Schomburgk established a vineyard in Boekvelde, and he was responsible for introducing the Sultana grape to South Australia. You might know about a series of newspaper articles on the vineyards and orchards of South Australia, written by Ebenezer Ward in 1861-62, and then published as a book. One of the vineyards he visited was Boekvelde. On the banks of the Gawler River, about 4 miles west of Gawler town, Dr. Schomburgk has a vineyard of about 5 acres. The vines are planted on the river slopes and in the adjoining gullies. It ends by saying that Dr. Schomburgk's wines have an excellent reputation in Gawler town. Now, there's a recommendation for you. So we know that the vines were planted in gullies, which were subject to flooding. And the floods were so strong that in April 1889, 5 of the 6 bridges were washed away. To showcase its farming produce, the Gawler Show was established in 1854, and it's probably still South Australia's largest country show. The first president was Richard Schomburgk's brother Otto. The South Australian Agricultural and Horticultural Society, which runs the Royal Show in Adelaide, published a magazine called The Farm and Garden from 1858 to 1863, which has interesting regional articles, such as this one in November 1859 on ploughing matches in Gawler, which took place on the property of James Sparshott. The above ploughing match and show of livestock took place on section 54, belonging to Mr. James Sparshott, situated on the southern banks of the Gawler River, about 1.75 miles west of Gawler town. And the article remarks on the condition of the soil, descriptions of the livestock, the weather, and the attendance. It's a great magazine. After the ploughing match, a banquet took place at the Old Bushman Inn with the Mayor of Gawler present. And the Old Bushman Hotel is still in Cowan Street. And amazingly, James Sparshott's farm and personal journal from 1864 to 1881 is in the State Library's archival collection, and it gives a glimpse into day-to-day farming through the seasons. Now, curiously, the name of Sparshott's farm changes from Saddlesham in Volume 1 to Siddlesham in Volume 2. Now, this is a typical page headed Weekly State of Labour on the Farm of Saddlesham, with columns for notes on the state of the weather, the names of the labourers and their tasks, and on the right, their number of days and pay rates. At the bottom, May the 2nd to the 4th, 1864, the names of the labourers are S. Parham, who was ploughing for 2 days, then taking oat stack on the 3rd. On the second line, Paul Christian was ploughing for 2 days, then was in the barn. James Cater must have been a shepherd because he was with the sheep at Lamb. Anne Porter was indoors and helping about the oats. James Sparshott went to Gawler or was at home or helping about the oats. On March the 11th to the 13th of 1867, McLean is at the waterhole, James Parham ditto. W. Perkins is winemaking. Thomas Armour is with the lambs. Rogers is with the flock. James Sparshott keeps a note of his own activities. On Monday, Mrs. Sparshott and self went to reed beds with Mr. Wingate. On Tuesday, he's in Adelaide, and on Wednesday in Adelaide, likeness taken, came home. And here are James and Sarah's likenesses. Now, these were actually taken for the old colonists' photographs from the 1870s, which are very much a story in themselves. Now, leaving farming for culture, Gawler became known as the colonial Athens, or the Athens of the South. This reputation largely came about through the activities of the Gawler Institute, which dates back to 1857, which was a significant year for Gawler when it was declared a municipality. The Gawler Institute's motto was, "It is good to be both merry and wise." It held monster fetes for fun and for wisdom it initiated cultural activities of lasting value, such as establishing a museum in 1859 and offering a prize for a written history that resulted in Edwin Hodder's 2-volume History of South Australia in 1893. A catalogue for the library and reading room for 1894 has survived, where the fiction pages include names like Olive Schreiner, Sir Walter Scott, and Miss Spence, Catherine Helen Spence. There's also a combined program of the literary societies for 1906, featuring evenings with themes such as a competitive evening, novel, a ladies' debate. Is theatre going consistent with the Christian profession? An Australian evening, scientific, historical, letter and impromptu. But the high point of the Gawler Institute was the holding of a competition for a prize of 10 guineas for the words of a patriotic song to be entitled The Song of Australia in 1859, 4 decades before nationhood. 10 guineas was also offered for the original music for the song. And of course, you know the winning song was written by Caroline Carlton with music by Carl Linger. And there are several editions of the Song of Australia in the State Library's sheet music collection. And do you remember in 1977, it was a candidate in a plebiscite to choose a new national anthem to replace God Save the Queen. So every state and territory voted for Advance Australia Fair, except for South Australia, and we voted for the Song of Australia, of course. And do we know what the ACT voted for? Waltzing Matilda. Gawler has its own homegrown musicians, notably Brenton Langbein, who was born in Gawler in 1928 and was an internationally known violinist, conductor and composer. He co-founded the Barossa Chamber Music Festival in 1890, and the State Library has about 17 metres of his personal papers. Another muso, Wes Carr, was born in Gawler in 1892, and he won Australian Idol in 2008. Of course, you all knew that. At Gawler's Regal Theatre in 1935, Heritage, a film directed by Charles Chauvel, was showing. The State Library Theatre program collection has about 10,000 programs, all individually catalogued, as is the menu collection, again, all individually catalogued. I don't think Fibber McGee's is there anymore. It was an Irish place. St George's School was established in 1850 as a private school. Its headmaster in 1853 was Leonard Burton, and the catalogue record for his portrait tells a typical story of a country town. Leonard Samuel Burton. He was later at the Gawler Model School and the primary school. He resided in Gawler for 42 years. He was mayor of Gawler and involved with the Freemasons, the Gawler Chess Club, the Gawler Comedy Club, the Gawler Cricket Club, and many more organisations. He was a local government councillor, local government head. His characteristics included conscientiousness, unflagging energy, and unselfishness. He died in a train accident in 1895. That's a pretty amazing catalogue record just for that photograph, I reckon. And this is a typical class photograph in 1946. I think we can all relate to this. But all we know about it is that it was a grade 7 class at a school in Gawler. And unfortunately, when it was donated to the library, it came without the names of the students and not even the name of the school, making it not very useful for research. So if you know the names of any of the students, if you go to the link to the Ask Us email, you can tell the archivist what you know about the photograph and they'll add your information to the caption. In 1859, a group of local men formed the Gawler Humbug Society. In 1863, one of these, Dr. George Knott, became the first editor of the newspaper of the society, the Bunyip, which aimed to lampoon and deflate perceived forms of humbug, in particular the humbug produced in South Australian Parliament. And it's still going. I mean, the newspaper, that is. I don't know if the humbug is still going on in Parliament. The first the first issue declared, "Why the bunyip? Because the bunyip is the true type of Australian humbug." Don't know what that means. Several prominent early South Australian journalists were associated with the small newsletter, including E.H. Coombe and George Loyot. And amazingly, the bunyip hasn't changed its title after 161 years, so the cataloguers are very thankful for that. Now, from culture to sport, which is an important part of the fabric of country towns. Sport historian and Olympian John Daly has written a case study, "Sport in South Australian Country Towns, Symbol of Unity and Cohesion Against the Outside World, Gawler in the 19th Century." He writes that sports and games played an important part in the developing sense of community in Gawler between 1840 and 1900, as evidenced by the proportion of space devoted to it by the local paper. Originally conceived as a satirical bulletin, within a short time the bunyip matured into a typical country newspaper. Sport played a significant role in the social life of colonial country towns. The outcome of football and cricket matches were the concern of the whole town, as were the ploughing matches in Gawler's case. This is a hard word. The integrative value of cricket is illustrated by the fact that often industrial or commercial teams in Gawler would include management and owners. J. Martin was particularly active in his works team. Matches were played between the various trades, as well as between labouring groups. When the employees of the Phoenix Foundry played a match among themselves, the teams were called Wood and Iron, because they were representatives of the carpenters and the blacksmiths. In 1894, A.E. Stoddart brought a team of English cricketers out to Australia for a tour. In those days, tours were privately organised by entrepreneurs as money-making exercises. So matches would be organised at suburban or country venues that were prepared to host them for money. They would have to put up the money to justify the visit. So it's a sign of the confidence of the Gawler Council and the local business folk that they stumped up the money to host a match. And Gawler actually hosted the first game of Stoddart's Australian tour on the 3rd and the 5th of November, 1894. It was the English 11 versus 18 players from Gawler and District, of whom the best player was E.H. Coombe, who we met earlier, and he scored 46 out of the team's 153. And the recreation ground is still there, now called the Princes Park Oval. There's a book on this series, and one of Australia's players was J.J. Jack Lyons, who was born in Gawler. Anybody know another couple of cricketers who were born in Gawler? Darren Lehman and South Gawler claimed Travis Head as one of their own. And of course, Travis is playing with the Test team right now. Other significant sports people born in Gawler are marathon runner Lisa Ondiki, or Lisa Martin, who attended Gawler High School. And she has a street named after her in East Gawler, Lisa Martin Court. Cyclist Jack Bobridge, born in Gawler, and Gawler won a bid to host a stage of the first Tour Down Under international cycling race in 1999. The Gawler horse trials were first staged in 1954. They were so successful that it was selected to host the World Eventing Championship in 1986. And I was there seeing New Zealander Mark Todd win the event on his horse Charisma. And in 1997, the event moved to the Adelaide Parklands. Now, from culture to industry, Gawler prospered with the discovery of copper nearby at Kapunda in 1843 and Burra in 1845. Historian Ian All, in the Gawler sketchbook, wrote, "After the discovery of copper, Gawler sprang into life as a ceaseless stream of traffic battled up and down Murray Street. To add to the congestion, horse-drawn trams competed for the centre of the road. And at intervals, shining new railway engines emerged from Martin's Foundry and steamed cautiously and majestically along Murray Street." This is a great little book. The railway arrived from Adelaide in October 1857 with much fanfare. The original railway station was demolished for a new one, seen here in this tinted postcard. And a local tram service for passengers and goods operated from 1879 up until 1931 to ferry people from the station into the town. Now, the caption to this photograph says that the tram is being driven by Percy Taylor, but I'm surprised that we don't know the name of the horses. The heritage station was featured in the magazine of the Mile End Railway Museum. And you can see the old station is way south of the town centre, and Gawler Central is the current terminus of the Gawler line. Has anybody been on the train out to Gawler? Yeah, a few. Is it good? Yeah. The first locomotive manufactured in South Australia was made in Gawler in 1890. It was made by the James Martin Foundry, which also manufactured bullock drays and agricultural equipment, and the factory employed around 700 people, so no wonder James Martin is called the father of Gawler on his plaque on North Terrace. James Martin was mayor of Gawler several times. He was a politician and a philanthropist. He has an entry in the Australian Dictionary of Biography and his statue in Gawler. Manufacturing was boosted by the arrival of John May, mechanical genius, who produced high-quality harvesters and mining machinery that was sent across Australia and overseas. But all that remains today of May Brothers Foundry is their agricultural showroom, now converted into apartments. So Gawler had become a manufacturing centre, I think more Birmingham than Athens. The telegraph and post office were vital communication links in country towns. Gawler's telegraph office was built in 1860, then a post office was built next door in 1866, then the telephone arrived in 1889. The initial plans for the post office didn't include a clock tower, but the government agreed that a tower would be added if the local council could raise the money for a suitable clock, which they did. And the clock was made by Wentz, Jewellers of Adelaide. It was installed on the 6th of September 1867, just in time for the visit of the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Alfred. But there was a problem with the clock. On the east face, where there should be a Roman numeral 6, V1, there is another 4, 1V, which was a bit scandalous. And it wasn't just the post office clock that had a mind of its own. Clocks are always erratic. In fact, a clock which does not lose or gain is a curiosity. But a town hall clock should, we think, keep time somewhere near the mark. On Sunday last, the Gawler town clock, possibly by way of relieving the monotony of a constant ticking and striking regular hours, varied the proceedings by bringing the number of strokes to 100. This being a novelty, quite a commotion was caused in Murray Street, and sundry old women even thought the day of judgment had arrived. On inquiry, we were informed that a screw was loose somewhere in the works. Strange to say, we thought so too. I love the writing in the newspapers in the old days. South Australia's first airmail delivery was made from Gawler to the GPO by Robert Graham Carey in November 1917 in a biplane, when he took off from the racecourse with 100 souvenir postcards and 10 letters. Carey was the first holder of an Australian commercial flying permit, and he used the air service for advertising, such as for Velvet soap. Now, I still use that wonderful yellow Velvet laundry soap. And you can see the aerial bicycle that Carey used as transport from the plane after he set down in a paddock to the nearest town where he was conducting business. Carey called his advertising a message from the clouds, which sounds kind of modern to us. There's a biography of him and a booklet on the airmail by the aerophilatelist H.N. Eustace. This postcard of Main Street, Gawler from 1907 was sent from Olive to Flo, whose address was just Brinkworth. There's a great interactive activity at the Gawler Heritage Centre where you can try your hand at sorting mail, and it's much slower than you think it should be, isn't it, Jeff? During World War I, a military survey was made of Gawler, resulting in a map by the magnificent mapmaker W.H. Edmonds in around 1914. The map was produced on cloth, so it could be folded and kept in a pocket, and it gives a good picture of the township, and in Edmonds' inimitable style, it shows the names of the station owners. Another resource that gives a good picture of the community are the postal directories. The big red books. Who here hasn't used the big red books? Oh, no, you must be about the only person. You must go into the State Library and look at them. So they were issued up to 1973. You can browse through them in the State Library's Family History Collection, or if you're brave, you can look at them all online. By 1890, Gawler had nearly 2,000 people, 408 houses, the weekly newspaper, the Bunyip, and communication with Adelaide was by trains 5 times daily. And there's Mrs. Sparshot on the right. Some towns produced their own directories or handbooks. The Gawler Handbook was published in 1880 as a record of the rise and progress of that important town by George E. Loyot. It features the explorer John McKinley, who organised the search party for Burke and Wills in 1861. McKinley lived in Gawler from the 1860s to the 1870s. He's standing at the back with his wife Jane. This advertisement at the back of the handbook caught my eye. I mean, all the advertisements are fascinating. At the top it says reform in funerals, and at the bottom it says funeral arrangements efficiently carried out. But the business is actually A.J. Woodman Furniture Warehouse. I was so fascinated by this concept of the furnishing maker undertaker that I researched one of these State Library talks on undertaking business in South Australia from the early days. So it's amazing how a little thing like that advertisement can spark your interest in a whole new topic. The best early history is by E.H. Coombe, who was one of Gawler's most significant residents. He was editor of the Bunyip for 25 years. He was a member of Parliament for the electorate of Barossa for 15 years, president of the Gawler Institute, member of several music societies, on the board of governors of the Public Library, Museum and Art Gallery. He supported votes for women, and during World War I, he opposed anti-German measures, such as the closure of Lutheran schools, and he led public campaigns against conscription, so he was a good guy. He also played first-class cricket for South Australia and was an excellent chess player. And the 100 of Coombe in the southeast of South Australia was named for him. There's a memorial to him in Tanunda, and the chapters of his history have evocative names like The Sunrise, 1857 to 1887. He's an enthusiastic writer. The year 1857 was the most eventful in the history of Gawler. Its fame as a go-ahead centre became known far and wide, and there were drawn to it colonists of remarkable intelligence and public spirit. Along with its industrial advance, there was a civic activity which gave the town a distinguished position in colonial life. Wit and wisdom of the first magnitude scintillated in the firmament of Gawler's life, and flashes of culture imparted brilliance and distinction. Another local historian was the prolific Derek Whitelock, who was commissioned by the Corporation of Gawler to produce a more contemporary history as part of Gawler's 150th Jubilee celebrations in 1989. You would have known Derek Whitelock very well. Yep. There are interesting photographs, like the various flooding events. Derek Whitelock's book was launched by the beloved Max Fatchen at a monster picnic, which the inhabitants of Gawler are invited to attend. Now, you might think that a poster is a throwaway item, but they are pieces of social history, and the State Library collects them. There's more than 10,000 in its poster collection, all individually catalogued. Backwards and in High Heels has stories from the Significant Women of Gawler project, edited by the wonderful Elizabeth Mansutti in 2010. And one chapter records the stories of some of the First Nations women living in the district. Now, I love this book. The words of local Gawler poet Martin Johnson are in his book called Full Glasses Pay Wages, a poetic interpretation of the changing culture of Gawler's front bars from 1907 to 08. Now, there's a specific title for you. And the reason this book is in the State Library is because of legal deposit. Now, hopefully you all know about legal deposit. Good. Where the Libraries Act requires you to deposit anything published in South Australia in the State Library to make sure that the state's publishing output is preserved for posterity. Now, I mention legal deposit in case you aren't aware that these days the State Library prefers to receive your publications electronically via NED, the National E-Deposit Scheme. So in a funny kind of a way, the book is dead. Long live the electronic one. So if the library decides that it needs a physical item, it will ask you or it will buy from you a physical book as well. Now, it's good to hear people's actual voices. A terrific source for local history information are oral histories. The State Library has more than 1,200 of them, and in about 60 of them, people talk about Gawler. They're easy to find in the catalogue by a keyword search for Gawler oral history. For example, the Gawler Oral History Society organised 21 hours of interviews with people like Douglas Rao. And the summary of the interview says he talks about the many waterholes along the South Parra River in the era 1915 to 1930. And we've been hearing about the waterholes throughout the evening. And in oral histories, you really get detailed local information that you're not going to get in a book. Now, I'm going to close by going back to 1839, when George Milner Stephen commissioned a map of a proposed township of Port Gawler after acquiring 4,000 acres of coastal mangrove swamps, which would give the Gawler River settlers their own port. I mean, as if they needed a port. The advertiser called the sale a hoax and a puff, which it was. Now, when this amazing, probably unique map surfaced last year, the Friends of the State Library, after much soul-searching, purchased it for $30,000. So there's no way the State Library could afford such a thing. So it's been conserved and researched to unearth an amazing story, which is worth a visit to the Mortlot Wing to enjoy. So thank you so much for being here to put a spotlight in historic Gawler, which is a lovely place to visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you, Lynn.
Wasn't that wonderful? And I love pictures, so thank
Oh,
you.
good.
for
Oh, good.
sourcing
Oh, good.
those.
Yeah.
We've got some
Oh.
things here for
Oh,
you.
thank you. You?
And a essay grapes,
Oh, wow.
the North Terrace plaques.
Fabulous.
And a copy of our
Oh,
journal.
lovely. Thank you so much,
So if
Lynn.
you'd like to pop them there,
Yep.
we're going to draw the raffle now.
Okay.
So, you're getting a whistle. So, sorry about that.
We can probably shout.
So get your raffle tickets out ready. We're going to draw the raffle now.